Now let's expand the scope of our knowledge on this subject, and for that I'm being joined live from our studios in Abuja by the Director of INEC Voter Education and Publicity, Mr. Oluwole Ostanze Uzi. Good evening and thanks for joining us on the news at 10.
Good evening and thank you for having me.
Now, as you've probably been watching, the National Assembly has just accepted to change the sequencing of the elections in the Electoral Act. Does that have any bearing at all on INEC's plans for the elections, which are just about a year away?
Well, thank you. I would say it does, in the sense that we had last year issued a timetable and schedule of activities for the elections. We had before then announced the dates and the sequence for those elections. And if you recall, we had said that there will be 2 days of elections on February 16th and then 2 weeks later. But from what we are hearing now, the National Assembly seems to want to change that. But the process is still inchoate. They have not done so. It's a proposal which has to be laid before both houses of the National Assembly. And before it becomes law, it probably has to have the assent of the president. So we are studying the situation, but we'll await the outcome of it. It's difficult for us to comment one way or the other now. But from what I've seen, there will now be 3 days of elections. That has its own consequences on the finances, on the logistics and all the arrangements, the forward logistics, the reverse logistics, and it has its issues, but we have to wait for it to become law, and let's see what the law actually says when it's eventually passed. In
that case, let me bring you to something you can talk about and which you are sure about, and that's the continuous voter registration exercise. Now, from the pre-report that we watched there, yes, people seem to have quite a number of complaints about the process, how long it takes, how laborious it is, and all that. Has this been the feedback that INEC has gotten since this exercise started? And if so, yeah, what is INEC doing about it?
Yes, we have received some of those reports. There have been mixed feelings from the stakeholders, but there's been some angst, some worry about the length of time it is taking most people, some people, to get registered. After the first phase of the exercise, don't forget we commenced this exercise earlier on. After the first quarter of the exercise, we went back to drawing boards and we consulted with stakeholders. And the feedback, for example, was that there were not enough centers. So additional centers were actually created. We started the exercise with registration only going on in the area council and the local government INEC offices of the commission. But apparently, some of those locations are quite a distance from a lot of the prospective registrants. So we decentralized this and created a lot more centers. And each state was allowed to create a certain number of about 8 to 10 additional centers. And they determined the location based on what they perceived to be the demand and after doing a logistical survey and the requests from stakeholders. But thereafter, we still looked at the situation and adapted it again when we discovered that people clamored for a rotation of these centers. People deemed it very, very far from certain locations, and that it would be better if we rotated these centers, and that is what we have agreed to do. So basically, depending on the state, some people, they use one particular center for 4 or 5 days or a week, depending on the state, and then rotate it and go to another location, such that it will be an equitable distribution of the centers where you can actually register.
From time to time, we get to hear stories about this exercise either having been finished or about to be finished. And then, of course, we hear counter information that says the exercise is continuous until 60 days or 30 days before the elections actually take place. Which is it? I think you need to give the assurance to the voters or the prospective voters who want to register. When does this exercise actually end?
First of all, I'm quite pleased that I'm not aware of any mainstream media that carried the news that the Commission was going to end the exercise at the end of January. We only saw that in social media, and no mainstream media carried it because we don't know where that rumor actually emanated from. There was at no time did we say that the exercise will end at the end of January or any other time. The law is quite clear on this, and I think we have said repeatedly that the exercise will end 60 days to the election if we're using the Electoral Act as it is presently. But of course, as you said, it's undergoing a review, but I don't think it will be that particular part of the Act or section of the Act will be affected. But 60 days to the election, we must close the register because we must certify this register that we're going to use for the 2019 elections and hand it over to the political parties and publish the register. We cannot add more names to that register after it has been certified and published. So it's continuous. It's going to continue right till that time. Of course, at the end of the quarter, we will, for 5 days, display the names and particulars, the list of those who have registered in the preceding quarter. So there will be no registration, but that will be a period for claims and objections. So that if there are any corrections to be done, if your name has been wrongly spelled, your sex is wrongly accredited to you or things like that, then those things will be corrected in that 5, 6, 7 days period for the claims and objections. And thereafter, we'll again resume the capture of data.
Thank you very much for speaking with us. INEC's Director of Voter Education and Publicity, Mr. Oluwole Ostanze Uzi. Thank you very much for joining us.